Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today with Stephanie Boyd, composer,
Hello.
and violinist Kurt Nikkanen.
Hi.
And I'm so excited that next year the Mid-Atlantic Symphony is playing for the first time Stephanie Boyd's violin concerto titled Vermilion with a soloist Kurt Nikkanen. Kurt is the concertmaster of the New York City Ballet, also an international soloist. We've collaborated many times, and he's played a lot of Stephanie's pieces as well. And we actually premiered Stephanie's concerto with the Chesapeake Youth Symphony last year. It was great fun for everybody involved, and I just really wanted to do the piece again. It has a lot of Scottish accents that Stephanie will tell us about. But so I'll let her introduce the piece, and then I'd love to hear from Kurt about his relationship to the piece as well.
Sounds good. So Vermilion was commissioned by the Chesapeake Youth Symphony Orchestra. Now that was about 2 years ago, and uh, at the time, I really wanted to go ahead and see about connecting with my Scottish roots. I mean, I'm a Boyd. Boyds are Scottish, and so I decided that as part of my research for this work, um, to take myself to Kilmarnock, Scotland, which is where the Boyds had a castle and used to be. And based on the really lovely visual imagery that I had there, that was my jumping off point for writing this fairly substantial work. It's about 25 minutes long, and it's for a full youth orchestra. So there's a lot of moving parts for it also. Um, and also I was able to write for an artist who I knew very well at that point. Of course, this is Kurt, and so it was really like being able to write a musical novel in a way, and to take the audience on a journey similar to the one that I went on back in what 2018. And so the first movement takes place amongst uh, the hills and the moors of Scotland, and you get all this gorgeous sort of foggy, lush melody. And uh, Kurt and his violin is sort of like this beam of light throughout the entire thing, and just leading you through these sort of unbelievably, yeah, again, just lush and beautiful moments. And the second movement is sort of this haunting elegy. So it's definitely a bit more spooky, and again, the violin is very much the leader throughout all of this, and you hear the main melody in the violin throughout most of it, and there are harmonizations and texture changes happening around the violin, but the violin remains mostly the main sort of through line. And then the third movement is this really raucous, riotous, energetic dance movement that literally has everybody on their toes, including Kurt, uh, with a really sort of smash bang ending. And that was inspired by um, being in Scotland and seeing a Cayley band play, which is this Scottish dance band essentially, and really wanting to recreate that energy in a symphonic work. And that's it. That's the piece, of course, with a large dose of virtuosity in the violin part, because I was getting to write for Kurt Nikkanen. So, yep.
Great, great. Oh, that's great to hear your description. You said at the time that you felt like you really poured your soul into this concerto.
Yeah. When I'm writing for other people, often I feel like a portrait painter, because I'm trying to distill their personalities and maybe their own memories or their aesthetic into a piece of music. But with this piece, it really felt like being able to paint a self portrait in a way. And again, Kurt and I had worked together already so many times that I felt so comfortable writing for him. And also, I used to be a violinist, so there's also this intense intimacy that I have with the violin as an instrument itself. But the writing process of this piece felt so natural and so powerful that yes, it did feel like the first time I was truly able to write my soul upon the page.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Kurt, how did your relationship with the piece grow as you got into it?
Oh, very naturally. I mean, that's actually one of the first things I felt when I encountered Stephanie's solo violin piece was how well everything fit on the violin and how easy it was to express yourself in a lyrical sense. And that's not true of many composers today. Very often they have a good, theoretical working knowledge of the violin and, technically what its capabilities are. But sometimes you feel like they're going out of their way to write things that push the instrument to the limit or somehow seem disconnected from the very nature of the instrument. And in Stephanie's case, maybe because she was a serious violinist for a long time, that was not the case. I didn't feel that I had to ask her to revise anything. All the expressive choices seemed to be organic. And I would say in the violin concerto, it's that way, but even more so. Maybe because it's her second effort in the genre, being Violin Concerto number 2. She'd already done a lot of that distillation process. And I think because it's a theme that is so close to her heart, it's that much more natural. And my job was just simply to get in that world. Originally, remember, I had joked with Stephanie about, are you going to write Scottish Fantasy number 2 or something like that? But, in no way is it a derivative piece. It doesn't remind me of any other music, but it's tonal and it's kind of firmly grounded in a folk music. And, like many classical composers that are inspired by folk idioms, that seems to kind of naturally propel the melodic ideas. So I found it was really fun to work on, and I'm so looking forward to playing it again, because it's not often that we get a piece that you can honestly say is just a natural expressive extension of the composer. I mean, nothing had to be discussed, and I found that time and time again when I worked with Stephanie, is that we would play through something and I would kind of, when I worked on it myself, I wasn't quite sure if she would like the direction I was going in, but we always managed to find ourselves on the same page. Yeah. And, I hope that our collaboration can continue and generate a lot more great music.
Fantastic. So in a minute, I'm going to go into some of Stephanie's influences, as she's talked to me about in the past. But I was curious about, like, this is not the first time you write a piece for Kurt. So if you want, tell us the progression of your collaborations and tell us the difference between this piece and the pieces you wrote for Kurt before.
Yeah, so Kurt has played a lot of my music. This is the first time I was writing specifically just for him.
Oh, okay.
He was a commissioner of Nostrorbus, which is a solo violin sonata that was commissioned by violinists from 35 countries in 2016. But this was very different than any other violin music I'd written, because we had worked so much together just that year prior that I had a very good, and Kurt.
Right. I think that's what I was trying to say is that laid the groundwork for this piece.
Yeah.
Even though that piece, the Nostrorbis, had been not specifically intended for me, the fact that I played it more than once and she kind of heard my evolution with it, she got a very good sense of how I would interpret something that she set to paper. Exactly. And I had a very good sense of what might come out in the next piece. And so it kind of naturally evolved that way.
Right. Exactly. So
Yeah.
so like at that point I had sort of a very, I think, accurate working model in my mind of what Kurt would sound like playing a particular line, or and how he would feel about it, and maybe what suggestions he would have to ramp it up just a little bit more. And so I had that going for me, while also uh, going back and accessing all of my old memories of playing in youth orchestras to do the same thing, to make sure that I was writing the right things for the orchestral part. So it was really fun, sort of this like meta composition, having Kurt on my shoulder in the most virtual of ways, I suppose. But because, I mean, the year prior, what we'd probably had like 3 or 4 performances of my music, with Kurt.
One of which was in a bar, as I remember. So all sorts of different venues.
Yeah.
You could see how it would come across in a variety of contexts. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was a packed house too.
Packed house.
Yeah, that was fun. So anyways, yeah, so it was really lovely. And I think anyways, next question, Julianne.
No, it's great to hear all this. On these concerts, we had recently a chat with the soloists for the second half, Kevin Short and Marsha Thompson, that will be singing the suite from Porgy and Bess. And it's an all-American program, including Gershwin, Boyd, and Barber. And Barber is one of your big influences. So the idea of Barber came from you basically. And we love the Knoxville Summer of 1915, sung by Marsha Thompson. Do you want to tell us about this relationship of this inspiration that Barber is for you?
Well, so I met Samuel Barber through his violin concerto when I was, I think, my late teenage years, and we have the same initials, and also, and he's the only composer I know where I agree with his every note, and his ability to take rhythmic and harmonic intrigue and put them together with melodies that stick with you every single time, and that push this agenda of nostalgia and memory. Of course, Summer Knoxville, prime example of that. But he really captures this sound world that is also very much accessing these truly important and potent human moments across time. And I just identify with that so much. And already, as a young composer, I already knew at that point when I met his work that was something that was really, really important to me also. Again, capturing these moments and these feelings, but also writing music that was going to be music to feel to. I say that I haven't done my job unless my audience gets goosebumps. And I feel like Barber is one of these composers who was getting goosebumps from his audience every single time, because he was giving them the space and the harmonies and the melodies to be able to have those sorts of visceral experiences. And yeah.
Great. And Kurt, you've played the Barber Violin Concerto quite a lot, actually.
So many times.
And the first time I came to hear you play at the ballet was the Barber Violin Concerto.
Was that the first time?
Yeah, it was the first time you invited me to come hear the ballet orchestra was Barber Violin Concerto. Do you feel this affiliation? And I definitely feel the affiliation between the Barber's language and Stephanie's language. I mean,
I think it shares a similar aesthetic in that virtuosity is not the end goal, and there's a sense of spaciousness, which I think is important. And also the Barber, similarly, that was one of the pieces I heard early on that made a big impression on me when I was maybe 8 years old. and I wanted to learn it immediately. And my teacher said, no, that's for later. And so, but I went and bought the music anyway, and I listened to every recording I could find, because it made such an impression on me in a way that none of the other 20th century concertos, except maybe Bartók's second, did. And
Yeah.
so it was great to actually find myself in a job where I got to play that piece quite a lot, probably more than I would in any other context.
Yeah.
But I think, it sort of shares that element. I think what it's going for, it's cinematic without seeming like movie music.
Yeah, and
that's a hard quality to achieve. Like, it has a landscape kind of presentation of its themes. They're very spacious and broad, and they evoke certain feelings without being specifically programmatic. And then short and brilliant last movement. Yeah.
And I want to tell our audience here that I find that Stephanie's music shares this like very generous lyricism with Barber, while bringing you in closer, to it, very intimate, but also, like you said, very spacious music at the same time. I think this concert would be very satisfying for an audience member with Barber and this Boyd concerto on the first half, and then the really opening it up with the Gershwin on the second half. It's going to be extremely satisfying to listen to. I can't wait. I'm wondering, Stephanie, if you would mention some of the other influences besides Barber as a composer that helped you grow up.
Sure enough. So I had sort of these two different groups of music that I was listening to when I was a kid. First one was big band jazz, because that's the music that my dad liked. So I grew up listening to Maynard Ferguson and Stan Kenton, and Henry Mancini is still one of my top 5 composers. And then there was the music that I was learning in orchestra. And so at first falling in love with Vivaldi, when I was 9 or so, and then growing up and sing Dvorak and Parrot and Tchaikovsky. And I think I still say sometimes that Tchaikovsky taught me how to feel like this wide range of emotions before I was old enough to have had enough life to have learned those organically on my own. So those are definitely my influences that are at the deepest parts of my brain, I think. Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it was just so marvelous to hang out with you for a little bit, and I want to thank you. We all know that we are under the threat of this pandemic, and that of course our first thoughts go to the victims, but we also worry about whether our concerts will happen. I'm pretty positive that by next April, almost a year from now, 11 months from now, when the concert happens, I think
Let's hope so.
fine. Let's hope things are fine by then. If not, it will have to wait for 2020, 2020, whatever, 2028, and do it. Exactly. We'll just push it back by 1 year every time. I can't wait to see you both next time. One of my next interviews will be with Kurt Nikkonen, and we'll chat more about his amazing career as a violinist, which is just full of different things that he has done, and
full of surprises.
A lot of surprises and amazing achievements, and it's just wonderful to see you, Stephanie, and see you like you're working on new pieces right now. You told me a piano piece, or
Yep, bunch of different, still working.
Fantastic. Yep. So thank you for joining us today, guys, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you very much.